Hey, everybody. Not sure if you're actually seeing this in the Facebook group, but we had some technical issues. Dana and I were having a great chat for about 20 minutes, and it turns out we were talking just to ourselves. So it was a great chat, but we're going to try and do this again. So I want to make sure, first of all, before we do anything, to make sure that it is actually streaming. So I'm in the group now, having a look. And oh, lo and behold, there I am in stereo. I'm going to have to kind of not look this way. Okay, so let's try this again. Take two. Hi, everybody. Carol Filion, Badass Banter, and super excited to be here with Dr. Daina Debly. And Dana is not only one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, but she is a licensed psychiatrist in Ontario who joyfully empowers women through the vision board creation process, enabling women to reclaim their sense of personal power, rediscover their dreams, and manifest their true paths. Combining science, subtle energy work, and creativity, she guides women on transformative journeys of self-discovery. Passionate about the power of the mind, Dr. Debly cultivates mindfulness, empowers positive mindset shifts, and supports women in creating lives they love. A compassionate catalyst for growth and joy, she helps women break free from societal expectations and embrace their sense of purpose. I can't think of anyone more perfect to be having this conversation with than my friend, Daina Debly. Help me welcome her to the virtual stage. There she is.
Hi.
And I know you're here and I know it's being broadcast because I see it.
Oh, so I'm glad I can't tell because
I know. I feel like I said this earlier. It's like, okay, I'm kind of bootstrapping this. So I feel like I'm the person with the little monkey on her shoulder and cymbals between her knees, trying to do all of this stuff all at the same time. But I digress.
You are talented.
Well, okay, I'll take that. But multitasking sometimes can be a little, well, anyways, another story for another day. So man, it's going to be kind of hard to recap what we were talking about, but we will do this. Dana, you and I were talking about redefining our purpose after 60, but it's also really about anybody that's in any kind of transition. And one of the things that we touched on specifically was, what if somebody isn't quite ready to retire or get packaged out? Because that's something that a lot of people are dealing with right now, whether they're 60 or not, right? So how do, what can someone do when they're not quite ready to retire?
I think that a lot of us fall into this trap over the course of our adult life, dreaming about retirement and dreaming about, when I am past 60, 65, and I can reclaim more freedom in my life, because the dream is about freedom to do what I want when I want and not being dictated to, whether it's the workplace, which is often the situation, or just the heavy weight of responsibilities that women carry. And I'll speak more specifically about women. Now, how can we manage and navigate these changes and the transitions? And I think I can safely say that clinically what I've seen over the years is that we talk about resilience, and really it's the adaptability. How able are we to adapt to change? And the people who tend to do the best are women who have maintained some level of investment in themselves over the years. And that could be just pursuing some personal interests outside of work, outside of the home, outside of taking care of children or a spouse or aging parents. It doesn't matter. We all carry these responsibilities. But there has to be this pursuit of the self and interest in the self, even if it's meeting up with friends twice a month or once a month, a fitness activity or a hobby. People who tend to do that over the lifespan seem to be able to shift a bit easier. It means that they're not they're not pouring themselves 100% into everyone else around them, which,
Right.
I think at different times we recognize we're doing that, and we have to step aside and reset and say, okay, but what about me? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's really important in being able to move forward. So your question was, what happens if people aren't ready?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was the main question.
Yeah. Yeah, but before you get to that though, well, actually, yeah, go to it, because I do have a follow-up question, and I'll kind of hint at it now, that yeah, those that have been looking after themselves and investing in themselves, but then there's the whole I don't want to seem selfish piece. So let's go to the yeah, they're not ready to retire. What do they do? And they felt.
So they're not ready to retire, and is that mostly what you're thinking about? Is that the fear?
Hmm.
What am I going to do next? And again, I guess I go back to, we dream about that, most of us, our adult lives, and then it becomes a reality. And I think we have to recognize it doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of situation. It doesn't have to be an abrupt stop to, if we're talking about work. A lot of people will shift into consulting. They do the same kind of work on their terms, but they work for themselves. They really harness the expertise and the wisdom that they've acquired over the years and their careers to be able to empower themselves and really, be the leader of how they want to run things. Um, so some people do that. Other people, as we know, do a complete departure from what they had been doing career-wise and change it altogether. Maybe they work part-time. Maybe they just do something they've always wanted to do, but they couldn't because the pension kept them there, or the benefits kept them, wherever they were before, or the level of income. So again, I guess I've kind of lost the question.
No, you're right. It's like they'll either they look at different options, but those that don't have any kind of options and really didn't think ahead are the ones that are caught by surprise.
Yeah.
I feel I was somewhat caught by surprise, because it's like the conversation to me changed from when I went from 59 to 60. Just that number alone, it was like there was something that flipped. But then
Yes.
but then I realized that, and I like to use this expression, is that I was the sourdough starter in that bread, right? The conversation changed for me inside my own head. It's like, whoa, I'm 60 now. What? Right? So, and so going back to what you were saying about those that fare better were those that made the investments in themselves.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that the people who have, the women who have completely devoted themselves to the responsibilities and the people in their lives, it doesn't mean that they've done something wrong or they can't do something different now. I think we all have to, embrace the opportunity to shift with the times. And maybe now it's something very new for someone to say, I'm going to invest in myself. And you had mentioned selfishness versus self-preservation or self-care. And it really is being aware of these conditioned patterns of thinking that we've had over our lifetime, especially for women. In many ways, I think we are conditioned and expected to carry a load, and the load of responsibilities, the mental load at home, and juggle many things. And it is still possible, though, to challenge ourselves and to challenge that paradigm and to say, there can be something different for me. I want something different for myself. But I really need to look at myself in order to do that. Now, I mean, I think I've spoken a lot about transitioning from work, companies and that sort of thing. But what about the transition in parenting?
Right.
Transitional roles there. Like
the kids moving out and that kind of thing, right? All of a sudden the kids are gone and it's like, whoa, who am I? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
And I also think like there are different phases to parenting. And, I'm still working my way through certain parts of parenting and phases, but it's the hands-on parent. When our children are first born and small, and then we shift into the coaching parent, when they're in their later teens, early 20s.
I love that.
And then what did I say? I kind of wrote it down here. Then there's the mentor. They come to you a little bit, a little less, but the questions are more sophisticated, and the dilemmas and the problems.
Right.
And then you go on to the consultant phase of parenting.
Right. I think it was Mark Twain, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was, when I was 16, I thought my father was the most stupid person in the world. But when I turned 21, I couldn't believe how much he'd learned in the last 6 years, right? It was this, I'm paraphrasing. That's not the exact quote, but it was along those lines. So that speaks to these phases of parenting that you're talking about.
Yeah. And then, so, a lot of women feel like, well, my children don't need me anymore, and that can lead to a lot of pain, and a lot of suffering. They don't need me anymore. Our children always need us, but just in different ways.
Right.
Sometimes it's just being there. They know we're there, but then it allows time for, self-discovery again, and pursuit in personal interests. And we forget how to do that. And so, I'll say to people, you have to start small. You start by folding your own laundry first. You start by, this sounds really ridiculous, but it's kind of basic. Go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom. Don't do just one more thing before you need to go to the bathroom. So it's responding to your own needs, but bringing awareness and recognition to that.
Well, and that's why it was so difficult when we were talking earlier, and the part that wasn't recorded, and I do want to bring it up, is that you were talking about, we're both alums of the Dare to Declare Vision Board Academy. And one of the questions that comes up when we're doing vision boards is, what do you want? And that seems to be one of the hardest questions. Can you speak to that one?
Oh,
because
yeah.
That's where, you wind up going to the bathroom only after all of this is done, right?
Right. Because we put ourselves last. And I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound bleak. I think it's just out of need. We end up being in that situation a lot where other people's needs come first and we have to wait. But then it becomes a pattern, and it can be, then we have to recognize we're in it and shift it. So, what do I want? Or, if you're doing it with a partner, you say, what do you want? And so people might say, oh, easy, I know what to ask for. But for me, I think I had to go 15 layers deep before I actually got to what I want, because it started with, well, what do I want? I want my children to be healthy. I want my children to be happy. I want my children to succeed and be, discover who they are. And then the list went on until, I think it was 15 times before, what do I want? And then I was like, oh.
Oh, me? You mean me? You're talking to me. Oh, I know. And for me, it was Judge Judy piped up and went, whoa. Don't say anything. Like, why? But right, it's almost, we don't even want to acknowledge that we want something. It's really quite.
It's interesting.
It really is interesting.
And so I would say, the work that can be done after 60, and of course at any age, but really we're focusing on after 60, with women who have carried so much and continue to, is we don't have to have a formal diagnosis to get help. You don't have to rely on professionals, to tell you what's wrong with you, to prescribe things. I mean, there's a time and a place for all of that. I mean, obviously, I subscribe to that, and I care very much about how people get help and they need to. But I'm quite fascinated with, how about we open up everything that people can do for themselves, because there's a lot people can do for themselves, a lot of self-reflective work. That doesn't mean we have to pathologize everything. So, we can do the self-reflective work. I will say we can do some of it alone, but we do need other people. So, many people will say to me, well, do you have your own therapist? But, we were trained. Psychiatrists have psychiatrists, That's a healthy thing to do.
Coaches have coaches. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
you can work with a friend, you can work with a coach,
Mhm.
but it's invaluable because when you're kind of put in that hot seat to, oh, I really do have an accountability to figure this out
Yeah.
and to figure myself out,
Mhm.
there's so much value there.
Mhm.
Um, and I know you do this kind of work and you bring in the humor so beautifully. It's contagious. And when people sometimes they feel very insecure and ashamed, like I haven't put myself first, I don't know where to start, but the humor just lightens everything up. And that's just a very natural part of you. Like I'm a very serious person, so I bring other qualities, but the humor is amazing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think that if we can't laugh at some of I'm a big proponent of George Carlin. I don't know if you remember him, but he would be able to find something absolutely hysterical in some of the most normal, mundane things. And that I think is why, and my dad was super witty and extremely funny. I could go on for days with some of his one-liners that were just, side-splitting funny. And I found that, yeah, in the midst of what seems like a really awful situation, I think humor just adds that little crack in there to let a little bit of light in
Yeah.
to know that there's something on the other side.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. But in any case, so this is really okay. So you've touched on here in some of these phase of life issues and so on. So that with the kids moving out, sometimes a lot of women of my vintage, anyways, find themselves alone, whether it be through divorce or death, and it's again another transition that requires a little bit of reframing, because there's nothing broken, but yet our mind seems to go there,
Hmm.
right? That it's broken. It's not, right? Can you speak to that a little bit?
You mean it's broken by being alone?
Yeah, that there's something wrong with that
Yeah,
somehow.
and it's so natural because so many people end up on their own for
Mhm.
different, as you said, for different reasons. Um, and there are some perks to that, and sometimes we have to shift and look at the perks. And we say, even though I feel very sad and alone, or even though I feel so alone and it makes me feel sad, I can do these things. And so you can recognize both at the same time, but I think that the connections are very important. So some women will connect online like we're doing now, and
Mhm.
it can be very helpful, and valuable in relationships. But I still think that the combination of even online relationships, but also the physical, real in life relationships are extremely valuable. I
Mhm.
don't think that, yeah, I mean, I just see some people all online, and I say, you really need to connect with people in this dimension, like, physically. And
Yeah.
so, again, looking at, well, what aligns with my values and principles? Like, what am I interested in?
Mhm.
And even if it's a walking group, but just seeing people, being out among other human beings, is very, very important. Um,
Agreed. Community, I think. It's
yeah,
that sense of community and knowing that you can lock arms with other like-minded people that have the same
yeah,
interest.
and it doesn't even mean having 10 new friends. It
No.
can be one or two.
Mhm.
It can be going out to a concert, even on your own, but still being around other people. But the
Mhm.
relationships, I think we have to challenge ourselves, and when we're in situations when we're alone
Mm.
and feeling lonely, and I think that a lot of people are ashamed to admit that, but it's a human need to have connections. That we get creative about how we find the relationships, even if they're superficial.
Right. And I agree with that. And I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, I think initially when everything shut down, I'm introverted. So I thought, oh, I don't have to be around people. Awesome. But that wears thin, even for someone that's introverted. Community, that I came out of that going, I never thought I would crave being around people. And I did. And so it's not a question of introvert, extrovert, or anything like that. I think it's a basic human need, like you said, to have that connection.
Yeah, even if it's on the phone.
Yeah.
So as you were saying that, I was thinking about my mother, who's 82, lives on her own, fully independent, like sharp as a tack.
Awesome.
And it's wonderful. And she always said, I'm never going to belong to the purple hats or something, that kind of idea, but it's not up her alley at all. She doesn't like that. But, she connects with, her cousins who, the relatives she still has around her. Mm-hmm. They will talk on the phone, new acquaintances. Just some of the connections she already had, maybe increase the frequency, take more initiative, pick up the phone more often, make an effort to visit more often.
Right.
So the connections you already have, make use of them, make more use, and then also think about making new connections.
Right.
Interest groups, or, I kind of think of traditional things, but those are my interests, like sewing and quilting. I love that sort of thing. I love to sew. Have I sewn really since I started medical school, which was almost a year shy, 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, not really, because then, anyway, but I will come back to that.
Yeah.
And that's something that I will, I'll reignite that passion. Mm-hmm. But you have to go back and what did I used to do and what did I used to love before I got married, or before I had children, or before my big career, or before I had to care for my family or my parents, whatever. Yeah. Because there's always a big bulk of a responsibility somewhere in our adult lives.
Absolutely. Well, and you were talking about your mom and stuff. My mom was pretty independent as well. I can, paint. And actually, after my dad passed, she briefly joined a choir too. And I said, oh, why did you wait so long? And she went, well, your dad didn't like me being out of the house. There's one, right?
That's a really important point. I just want to back up and say we all have huge responsibilities in our adult lives, and I should apologize for saying that, because some people don't, and the loneliness is actually the most pervasive part of their suffering, even at all points. So my apologies. I don't mean to exclude anyone, but your mom joining the choir, and you said, why did you wait so long? Yeah. So I see women. You're right. I think 60, well, we all know there are these milestones, 40, 50, 60, and beyond. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about 60. And I can think of a woman who, she really was very controlled by her husband in ways she wasn't even aware of it. And different things happened in their relationship, and the awareness came to the surface. And she realized, I don't cut my hair the way I want to cut my hair. I don't wear the color lipstick I want to wear because he doesn't approve. I don't wear the clothes I want to wear because he doesn't like them. I don't, the list went on. Yeah. And, over time, as she stepped more into her own power for various reasons in the relationship, she now she pursues her personal interests because she knew her husband would never approve because they're not his things. Right. It's not about whatever his line of work is, but she's taking the steps to do that now. And she colored her hair purple, and she wears the clothes she wants to wear. And, he's still around, and he'll kind of raise his eyebrows and look at her. And she says, I love it. I don't care. And, it hasn't broken up their marriage, but she was always afraid. Yeah. So, yeah. She is redefining herself.
Yeah. Perceptive. Yeah.
and much happier, you know?
I love
So
it. I
yeah,
love that. I love that. And just to be clear too, it's not like my dad was super controlling or anything like that, or and my mom was like a really strong, independent woman. But there was just something, yeah, there were all these little subtle things like if he raised an eyebrow or whatever, fine, I won't do it. She was picking her battles, essentially,
yeah.
and not that there would be a battle, but in her mind, maybe she just kind of
For
assumed
sure.
like, oh, you know what? I don't want to see the pouting or whatever, right? The very subtle kind of
It's
stuff.
the subtle ways of
Yeah,
controlling each other
right.
and,
Yeah.
controlling why so that the other person doesn't feel distressed in any way or angry or
Mhm.
disapproving. And, I think that, well, I know that there are a lot of, um, and then it happens both ways, but women who feel like they've lost their voice.
Yeah.
They don't know how to even form their own opinion about certain things anymore because they've been silenced in the relationship
Mhm.
by a partner. And so, we start with exercises like, well, what, we think up a scenario and, well, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's very hard for people to practice expressing their own thoughts about that and actually vocalizing that. And
Right.
so it does take some practice until you write out your thoughts and then you read out those thoughts. This
Mhm.
is my opinion about this,
Mhm.
and then you record it and you listen to your own voice
Mm.
saying those thoughts, and then maybe you speak them to another living person outside of me,
Right.
and all these steps that people can start from, you know the most quiet places, but progress can be made.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that we see that question, what do you want, can be such a huge question for some of these women who haven't had the prep work, who haven't really done the prep work, that once they hit and then this they have to redefine their purpose, they're all of a sudden it's like deer in the headlight, right? What do I
Yeah.
want? What exactly? And there's also the you know, what are some of the things that would that can inspire us rather than leaving us feeling exhausted at the very thought of having to do this work?
Well, do you mean in a situation where a person might have 5 more years they need to work before retiring?
Yeah. Yeah. Any kind of transition, anything that there's going to be a big change. There's something coming down the pipe or it's already there. And
Well, or which is slightly different than saying, how can I drag myself to this
mm,
situation for the next 5 years because I know I can't leave it before 5 years.
yeah,
How do
let's stick
I do
with
that?
that one. Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah.
Um, I think I've seen people really do that successfully when they start creating an exit plan.
Mm,
So yes, I know, I accept I have to continue doing X, Y, and Z for the next 5 years.
right.
Um, but I'm not going to wait until then to start making my next steps or thinking about what am I going to do then. I'm going to start thinking about that now. I'm
Mhm.
going to research it. I'm going to start talking to people and or starting to learn about what do I even love to do. And again, it comes back to insert the points or the fueling stations, while you're doing the
Yeah.
part that you really don't enjoy. Because if you have these joyful things going on the side, or at least an exit plan, I
Mm,
know I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to start making that plan now. It makes it more tolerable.
yeah.
And I have seen that over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you can't get out of responsibilities or, a job until a certain date.
Mm. Yeah, you brought that up. It brought up an important point too, the fueling stations, right? This is something we've talked about. So that really touches on what is it that lights you up, what makes your heart sing, what is it, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about those fueling stations and how we can discover them?
Yeah, well, so we talked about, and I think about connecting the dots. So we have to insert points of time that we can look forward to something. And maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once every 2 weeks, we start there. But to be able to infuse more points of pleasure, we say joy, that's sort of like 100 out of 100, 100%. But or bliss is, bliss can happen in a microsecond. Yeah. It can be the sun streaming through the window at 4 p.m. It's very peaceful. It can be twinkle lights that, when you catch your breath, or you think, oh, I just love that. Or I think I gave the example one time of coffee. Like, I don't love the taste of coffee, but lots of people do. And it's just a freshly brewed cup of coffee, like, the aroma. That's blissful.
Absolutely.
Maybe it lasts a few seconds or even a microsecond. But you start to infuse more of those things, and then larger activities or meeting with people, things to look forward to, going to a concert, doing something different outside of your regular routine. And you start to, create these fueling stations. Right. This will keep me going, even though I have to also continue with something I really don't enjoy. I don't have to wait for a perfect time. There's no perfect time. I can do both at the same time. Otherwise, I'm never going to get to the fun. Right. And it's really reframing, right, from what might feel selfish to more self-full. Right? Yeah. Just having a better sense of, this is what I like. I do get something out of this. This does light me up. But we step over that, don't we? And a lot of those things that light us up are actually where our gifts lie, right? And so I know we're getting up to time here. You probably have to go, but I want to just have like maybe a final word. If you could, if there was one final word you could leave us with, Daina, when it comes to redefining your purpose, what would that be? Finding your purpose. I would say, I think people are very hard on themselves. I think as women, we're very hard on ourselves. It's okay to be starting or restarting for the first time, looking at ourselves and trying to understand what makes us tick. There are a lot of women who will look at me and say, they come to a bit of an epiphany or a crossroads in their lives, and they say, why am I just learning this now? Isn't that pathetic? And I say, no, isn't it powerful? Oh, yeah. Words, right? The power of words. That's amazing. That's a fabulous place to leave it. So I know that you have something special for our listeners, and that is a set of meditations, and it's all about giving ourselves permission. And I think it's perfect for this. Yeah. So permission to not be perfect. Yay! Yeah. Where do I sign? I've already downloaded mine, so it's okay. Everything starts from within. So we have to give ourselves, honor ourselves enough to spend a little time with ourselves, and they're very short meditations, guided meditations, and under 15 minutes each. Amazing. And between interruptions, we can find time for ourselves. Yes, indeed. Even if we have to carve out a little bit of time and just kind of sit in the pantry for a minute or two. Yeah. Whatever works. Well, Daina, I can't thank you enough. This was such a great conversation. I'm glad we were able to get the technical issues resolved so that everybody else can benefit from this conversation. For those of you listening in, there will be links in the comments below on the download that Daina's just mentioned, and as well as contact information. So again, thank you. This has been phenomenal. I am so deeply grateful for the time you've taken to spend wonderful. With us. I really appreciate speaking to you and you making it so easy. Oh, God love you. All right, my friend. We will talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye. Right. Bye.